What makes a civilization transcend time? Some ruled for centuries. Others left traces we barely remember. But there was one that envisioned its history in terms of thousands of years. Egypt was not just an ancient kingdom. It was an idea about order, about power, about time, and about death. This is not the story of a single pharaoh, nor of a single dynasty. It is the story of a civilization that fell and rose again and again, that conquered and was conquered, that shaped the ancient world and was shaped by it in return. What you are about to hear is a timeline, a journey through the moments when Egypt was born, when it fractured, when it expanded, and when it endured. To understand how a civilization could endure for more than 3,000 years, and why, even today, we are still talking about it. Long before there were pharaohs, before the pyramids, before even the name Egypt, between approximately 5,500 and 3,200 BCE, the Nile Valley was already a landscape of life. Thousands of years ago, human groups began settling along its banks. They did not form a kingdom. They did not follow a single ruler. They were agricultural communities that learned to read the rhythm of the river and adapt to it. Each flooding of the Nile left behind a strip of fertile land. That constant cycle made possible something exceptional in the ancient world: predictability. While other regions depended on irregular rains or uncertain seasons, here time itself could be anticipated. Over the centuries, these communities grew. Larger villages emerged, specializing in agriculture, pottery, and trade. By the 4th millennium BCE, simple hierarchies began to appear. Some burials started to stand apart from the rest. Not everyone held the same status. The first symbols also emerged: animal figures, ritual objects, and identity marks that went beyond mere survival. From these earliest moments, death occupied a central place in their worldview, not as an end, but as a transition. Egypt did not yet exist, but its essence was already there. Through the Nile, these communities came into contact with other peoples. To the south, with Nubia. To the east, with regions of the Levant. From at least the 4th millennium BCE, they exchanged goods, ideas, and techniques. The valley was not isolated. From its origins, Egypt was part of a broader network. Over time, some villages grew more powerful than others. Authority began to concentrate. Symbols became more complex. The need for organization increased. By the end of the 4th millennium BCE, the balance was shifting. Without realizing it, these communities were taking the first steps towards something new. Not a collection of villages, but a state. The birth of Egypt was drawing ever closer. By the end of the 4th millennium BCE, the balance of the Nile Valley changed forever. For generations, the communities of the south and the north had shared the same river, but not the same power. To the south stretched Upper Egypt, a narrow and fertile strip confined between deserts. To the north, Lower Egypt opened into the Great Delta, broader, more fragmented, and closely connected to other regions of the eastern Mediterranean. For centuries, both territories developed their own traditions, distinct symbols, and independent centers of power. They shared gods, rituals, and the rhythm of the Nile. But they did not form a single political entity. Around 3100 BCE, that division came to an end. Archaeological and symbolic evidence points to a process of unification that culminated in a key figure, Narmer. More than a simple conqueror, Narmer became a symbol. In early representations, he appears wearing the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt, uniting in his person two worlds that had until then remained separate. With this unification, something entirely new was born. For the first time, the Nile Valley came under a single authority. Power ceased to be local and became centralized. And with it emerged an unprecedented figure in the ancient world, the pharaoh. The pharaoh was not merely a ruler. In early tradition, he was seen as the earthly manifestation of Horus, the falcon god, protector of order and kingship. He was the guarantor of cosmic order, a mediator between the gods and humanity. His role was not simply to command, but to maintain the balance of the universe, what the Egyptians called Maat. From this moment on, political power and religious authority were inseparable. To rule Egypt meant to rule time, the harvests, the flooding of the Nile, and the relationship with the divine. With unification, Egypt ceased to be a collection of communities and became a state. From this point forward, its history would no longer be merely local. Egypt had officially entered history. With unification firmly established, Egypt entered a period of unprecedented stability. Between approximately 2686 and 2181 BCE, power became more concentrated than ever before. The Egyptian state grew highly centralized. Everything revolved around a single figure, the pharaoh. From the capital, the pharaoh oversaw administration, the redistribution of resources, labor organization, and ritual life. Officials, scribes, and priests formed a structure designed to sustain an order that was conceived as eternal. That order had a name: Maat. Maat was not merely a moral idea. It was the principle that upheld the universe. It represented balance, justice, and harmony between humanity, nature, and the gods. As long as the pharaoh maintained Maat, the world functioned as it should. The pyramids emerged as the ultimate expression of that system. They were not simple tombs. They were colossal political and religious projects. They required planning, organization, agricultural surplus, and absolute control over labor. But above all, they were only possible because the state had achieved something extraordinary: control over time, over the workforce, and over the shared belief of an entire society. By raising them, the state demonstrated that order had already been secured, and the pharaoh ensured his eternal existence alongside the gods. At the height of the Old Kingdom, these structures dominated the horizon of the Nile Valley, not as works in progress, but as completed monuments. Pyramids that imposed their presence upon the landscape and reminded all who passed that the power of the state and the pharaoh was absolute. Beside them, a figure watched over the desert from the living rock itself. The Great Sphinx, carved during this same period, embodied the pharaoh as the eternal guardian of order. With the body of a lion and the face of a human, it did not gaze toward the past or the afterlife. It guarded the balance of the present. During this period, Egypt looked primarily inward. It did not seek aggressive expansion. Its strength lay in stability, continuity, and the repetition of order. The outside world existed, but it was not the focus of its attention. For centuries, the system worked, but no order is eternal. Toward the end of the Old Kingdom, tensions began to surface. Central authority weakened. Regional governors gained autonomy. Possible climatic and economic crises affected the foundations of the system. Around 2181 BCE, the balance broke. The model that had sustained Egypt for centuries collapsed. The eternal order had come to an end, and with it began the first great fracture in the history of Egypt. The collapse of the Old Kingdom was not a sudden event. It was a process. After centuries of stability, the system that had sustained Egypt began to unravel from within. Around 2181 BCE, central authority lost its ability to maintain control. The first intermediate period had begun. The power of the pharaoh weakened. Regional governors, known as nomarchs, no longer obeyed a single authority and began to rule autonomously. Egypt ceased to be a unified state and fragmented into multiple centers of power. The central administration collapsed. The redistribution of food became irregular. The balance that had guaranteed stability for generations began to fail. Political crisis was compounded by climatic and social factors. Evidence suggests periods of prolonged drought and irregular Nile floods. Harvests declined. Famine spread. Confidence in the system eroded. In this context, the idea of Maat began to falter. If the pharaoh was the guarantor of universal order, how could chaos be explained? For the first time, the myth of eternity cracked. Texts reflect a world of uncertainty, where order was no longer assured and stability seemed lost. Egypt entered a period of internal conflicts, regional rivalries, and loss of cohesion. The country that had believed it had mastered time now discovered its own fragility. Yet even in the midst of collapse, Egypt did not disappear. From this fracture would emerge new forms of power and a different vision of kingship. History continued, and order, though broken, could still be rebuilt. After the chaos of the First Intermediate Period, Egypt began to recover. Around 2055 BCE, the country was reunified. Central authority was restored, but not in the same way as before. The experience of collapse had left a profound mark. The pharaoh remained a sacred figure, but he was no longer a distant and untouchable god. Now he was expected to govern, to administer, and to respond. His legitimacy rested not only on divine lineage, but on his ability to maintain order and prosperity. This new balance gave rise to the Middle Kingdom. Egypt once again became a cohesive state. The administration was reorganized, the economy strengthened, and control over resources reestablished. The country began a controlled expansion to the south, consolidating its dominance over Nubia, a region crucial for its gold, its trade routes, and its strategic position. At the same time, Egypt intensified trade with the Levant. From there came timber, oils, and exotic goods. Through exchange, Egypt reintegrated into the networks of the ancient world, not as an isolated power, but as a stable and reliable actor. Yet reconstruction was not only political and economic, it was also spiritual. After the collapse, the relationship between humanity, the gods, and death changed forever. During the Middle Kingdom, the idea of life after death ceased to be an exclusive privilege of the pharaoh. The god Osiris moved to the center of Egyptian cosmology. Osiris, lord of the afterlife, represented the promise of eternal existence founded on justice. Before him, not only the pharaoh, but any individual could be judged. The heart would be weighed, conduct would be evaluated. Alongside Osiris, Isis embodied protection, magic, and the continuity of life. Anubis, guardian of funerary rites, became the guide in the passage between this world and the next. Mat remained the principle that upheld the universe. But now, each person bore the responsibility of living in accordance with it. Eternity had been democratized. This transformation profoundly reshaped Egyptian society. Funerary texts began to spread. Tombs were no longer reserved exclusively for royalty. The hope of transcendence no longer depended solely on power but on conduct. The Middle Kingdom was a period of restored stability. Egypt had learned from its fall. Order had been rebuilt. But once again, the world was about to change. The stability restored during the Middle Kingdom did not last forever. Around 1650 BCE, Egypt fragmented once again. The Second Intermediate Period had begun. This time, the crisis did not arise solely from within. The Nile Valley came under foreign rule. A people from the Levant, known to the Egyptians as the Hyksos, settled in the north of the country and took control of Lower Egypt. The Hyksos did not arrive only as conquerors. They brought a different way of making war. They introduced the use of the horse, the war chariot, and more advanced bronze weapons, technologies that Egyptian armies had not yet mastered. The clash was not only military, but cultural. For the first time in centuries, Egypt was ruled from outside. The power of the pharaoh was reduced. The country was once again divided. While the Hyksos controlled the north, Egyptian dynasties survived in the south, especially in Thebes, preserving traditions, rituals, and Egyptian identity. This period was a deep wound. Egypt did not only lose political control, it also lost the certainty of its invulnerability. The order it had believed to be guaranteed by the gods no longer seemed absolute. Yet domination did not mean disappearance. In the south, Theban rulers began to adapt. They learned from the new technologies. They reorganized their armies. They waited. The Second Intermediate Period was a time of humiliation, but also of preparation. Egypt was watching, learning, and waiting for the moment to reclaim what it had lost. The counterattack was drawing ever closer. The wound of foreign domination was not the end of Egypt, it was the catalyst. Around 1550 BCE, the rulers of the south succeeded in expelling the Hyksos. In doing so, they recovered not only territory, but something deeper: confidence. The new kingdom had begun. Egypt entered its most powerful era. For the first time, the country stopped looking only inward and projected itself outward. It became an international power with standing armies, active diplomacy, and a decisive presence in the balance of the ancient world. This new Egypt rested on a powerful alliance between the throne and the gods. The cult of Amun, god of Thebes, grew until it merged with Ra, the ancient sun god. Amun-Ra became the supreme deity of the state. The temples were not merely religious centers. They were economic, political, and symbolic institutions. Through them, the pharaoh legitimized his authority as the chosen of the gods. In this context emerged some of the most influential pharaohs in Egyptian history. Hatshepsut ruled in a world dominated by men, and she ruled through divine legitimacy. She presented herself as pharaoh by the will of Amun and favored trade over war. Under her reign, Egypt prospered through commercial expeditions that strengthened its wealth and stability. Yet religious balance would not remain permanent. Akhenaten broke with centuries of tradition. He rejected the power of Amun-Ra and elevated Aten, the solar disk, as the supreme deity. He closed temples, moved the capital, and attempted to impose a new vision of the world. It was an unprecedented religious revolution and a deeply unstable one. After his death, Egypt sought to restore order. Tutankhamun reinstated the traditional cults and returned the gods to their rightful place. His reign was brief, but it symbolized an effort to heal a fracture that had endangered the stability of the empire. In time, Egypt reached its greatest expression of power under Ramesses II. Ramesses did not only build colossal temples and statues, he also led Egypt into confrontation with another major power of the time, the Hittite Empire. The clash culminated in the Battle of Kadesh, one of the best documented conflicts of the ancient world. Although neither side achieved a decisive victory, the outcome was historic. Egypt and the Hittites signed the earliest known peace treaty. From then on, diplomacy became as important as warfare. Egypt maintained complex relations with Nubia, the Canaanite peoples, and later with the so-called Sea Peoples, who began to shake the balance of the Eastern Mediterranean. The New Kingdom was Egypt's golden age, an era of expansion, wealth, and power, but also of internal tensions, rival gods, and a state that had grown so vast it slowly began to wear down. Splendor had reached its highest point. And, as always in Egypt's history, nothing would last forever. The splendor of the New Kingdom did not vanish overnight. It eroded. After centuries of expansion, warfare, and monumental construction, the Egyptian state began to lose cohesion. Around 1070 BCE, central authority weakened irreversibly. The third intermediate period had begun. The pharaoh still existed, but he no longer ruled alone. Power fragmented among rival dynasties, local authorities, and above all, a new dominant force, the priesthood. The priests of Amun, based in Thebes, accumulated unprecedented influence. They controlled lands, wealth, and armies. In many cases, their authority rivaled, or even surpassed, that of the pharaoh himself. The balance between the divine and the political had been broken. Egypt was no longer governed by a single will, it was a divided land. Internal fragmentation was compounded by external influences. In the north, dynasties of Libyan origin took control of entire regions. In the south, the Nubians advanced from Kush, adopting Egyptian traditions while also claiming the legacy of the pharaohs. Egypt remained culturally powerful, but politically vulnerable. Its gods were still worshipped, its temples still stood. But the state that had once sustained them could no longer project its authority beyond its borders. As other powers rose across the Mediterranean and the Near East, Egypt ceased to set the rhythm of the ancient world. The center of power was shifting. Egypt had not disappeared, but it no longer dominated. Slowly, its power was dissolving. The weakening of central power left Egypt exposed. From around 664 BCE onward, the country entered a new stage in its history, the Late Period. Egypt no longer set the course of the ancient world. Now, it had to adapt to it. From the south, the Nubians advanced from Kush. They adopted Egyptian culture, worshipped its gods, and ruled as pharaohs. They did not come to destroy Egypt, but to claim its legacy. For a time, the Nile Valley was once again unified under rulers who considered themselves legitimate heirs of the Pharaonic tradition. But the balance was brief. From the northeast, an unrelenting power burst into the region, the Assyrian Empire. Its armies advanced with violence, sacked cities, and shattered Egypt's fragile stability. For the first time, Egypt faced a domination that did not seek integration, but submission. After the Assyrian withdrawal, another force took control. The Persian Empire incorporated Egypt as just another satrapy. The country became part of a far larger imperial system, governed from afar. The pharaoh was no longer an absolute sovereign, and yet Egypt did not disappear. Despite the conquests, the temples remained active. The rituals continued. Egyptian gods were still worshipped. Amun, Osiris, Isis, and the ancient cult survived even under foreign rule. The conquerors ruled the territory, but they did not erase its identity. Egypt had lost political control. It had lost the power to dominate, but it preserved something deeper. Its culture, its religion, its memory. Egypt no longer ruled the world, but it had not yet spoken its final word. The ancient world was changing, and once again, Egypt found itself caught in a transformation greater than itself. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great arrived in Egypt. He did not come as just another conqueror. He was received as a liberator from Persian rule and recognized as pharaoh. With him, Egypt definitively entered the orbit of the Hellenistic world. Alexander did not rule for long, but his arrival marked a turning point. After his death, one of his generals took control of the territory. Thus began the Ptolemaic dynasty. For nearly 3 centuries, Egypt was ruled by kings of Greek origin who adopted the title of pharaoh and maintained ancient traditions to legitimize their authority. The country became a meeting point between 2 worlds. Egyptian and Greek cultures blended. Gods were fused. New forms of worship emerged, along with new centers of knowledge and a capital that symbolized this union. Alexandria, one of the greatest intellectual hubs of the ancient world. Yet coexistence did not eliminate tension. The Ptolemaic pharaohs ruled from Greek-style palaces, while the Egyptian people remained devoted to their temples, rituals, and ancestral gods. Egypt no longer determined its own destiny. The final great figure of this era was Cleopatra. Cleopatra was not only a queen, she was the last attempt to preserve Egyptian independence in a world dominated by Rome. Skilled, educated, and politically astute, she sought to sustain her dynasty's power through alliances with Roman leaders. But the balance could no longer be maintained. After her defeat, Egypt was incorporated into the Roman Empire. With that, the Pharaonic world came to an end. Not in a single day. Not with the immediate disappearance of its gods, but with the definitive loss of its sovereignty. Egypt became a province of Rome. The Pharaonic state ceased to exist, yet its legacy, its gods and its ideas, and its obsession with eternity would endure long beyond its political end. Egypt no longer rules, its pharaohs no longer reign, its armies no longer march, its temples no longer dictate the destiny of the world, and yet Egypt never disappeared. For more than 3,000 years, this civilization was born, fell, and rose, again and again. It was conqueror and conquered, dominant and subdued, divine and human. It attempted something few cultures even dared to imagine: to overcome time. It did not achieve this through eternal conquests or invincible empires. It did so through ideas, through a vision of order, through a unique relationship between humanity, the gods, and death. Egypt understood power as balance, life as transition, death as continuity. Its gods changed, its kings transformed, its borders shifted, but its identity endured. Today, thousands of years later, we still look at its pyramids, we still read its symbols, we still ask ourselves how a civilization could last so long. Egypt did not conquer eternity, but it challenged it. And in that attempt, it left a mark that time itself could never erase. A mark carved not only in stone, but in the imagination of humanity, where it still stands. And as long as we remember, Egypt endures. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. If this documentary helped you better understand Egypt, if it allowed you to see its history through new eyes, we invite you to support the channel. Leave a like, subscribe, and share this video so more people can discover these stories. Here, we continue exploring the great civilizations of the past, their moments of light, their downfalls, and the legacy they left in today's world. If you're interested in history told with context, depth, and a human perspective, we invite you to watch our other documentaries on the channel. Thank you for being here. We'll see you on the next journey through history.